G'day everyone, welcome back, Grandma's Handbag. Cheers to all of you. We got part 4, number 70 to 61, back into the top 100. So let's get the helper out of the way and let's get on the road. Japanese single malt, the Yamazaki no age statement, JG Yokohama. Hope you're enjoying what you can get of Japanese whiskies there. They're very expensive outside of Japan. So cheers to you. Cheers to everyone for dropping back in as well. Let's just get into it, shall we? Alright, number 70. Panda Bear with Person Pitch. This one, beautiful album, deeply personal, yet universal. There's this whole theme for me of life, death and rebirth sort of going on in there. And partially because it was recorded at Noah Lennox, the man behind the moniker Panda Bear. His father had died, and it was after his father had died and while his first child was coming along. So it's this wonderful celebration of life and the whole cycle of it. There's organic instruments and samples colliding in this real sort of psychedelic tapestry in their songs. To me, they almost feel more like cantatas than pop songs. You know, they frequently take these left turns and things you just don't expect. The influences, stacked harmonies, Beach Boys, Think Smile era Beach Boys, filtered through dub and electronica production. These hymnal vocals combined with tribal percussion and left field instrumentation, and they really what make this album, I don't know, it's that spiritual, that sort of life and death celebration, and make it a real communal experience, which to me the cover definitely sort of delivers as well. It's a commune, it's a collage, just like the sounds within the album. It's got a really interesting flow as a result. There's 2 long songs as centerpieces of the album on sides B and C, and then they break up the shorter songs on A and D. So, to me this album feels like it's the true air of Smile and Van Dyke Park song cycle. A modern day song cycle, in fact. Panda Bear, this is his best output with this one, and I think he even bested Animal Collective, although with Merriweather Post Pavilion in about the same time. It's a real purple patch for them. I may not know exactly what this album is about, but I tell you what, I feel every bit of it. To me, it's this place where hopes, dreams and memories converse outside of time. I know that sounds really wanky, but like, it's a magic place is what I mean, and that's what this album is for me. Alright, if you remember my top 100 teaser video, I laid out a few parameters in shaping this list. Well, the following one is a great example. At number 69 from 1969, The Beatles with Abbey Road. Now, with those parameters, think of this album as a bookend. That's kind of the way I did in shaping the list. Any album before and including Abbey Road by the Beatles could easily and equally end up in this list for me. But you got to make some hard decisions, and Abbey Road at 69. This album for me was a constant in growing up. Some of my earliest musical memories used to be a dad kind of, he'd do these things called Beatle nights when we were, you know, 5, 6, 7 years of age. And it'd be Beatles all night long, Beatles solo stuff. Dad'd sit there with a wine and sing along, and we'd cuddle up close and do our best as well. Magical stuff. Really, really, really fond memories of that. you know, I'd be sitting there singing along. Dad would go in for heavier ballads on this album, like I Want You and Oh Darling, those real soul edge vocals. And I'm a little kid, what did I go for? Octopus's Garden, Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Well, he'd point out things on this album, like the whooshing sound of the synthesizer on I Want You. And he told me all about this medley of songs that cleverly ran together all over side 2. The drummer, he wrote the Octopus song. That the other guy that wasn't John or Paul wrote 2 of the best songs on the album, In Something and Here Comes the Sun. The cover held a mystery to me. How did these 4 guys get so hairy compared to the pictures you see on the Beatles Red and Blue album? The Beatles Red album, really. Basically, this album introduced me to being a fan of the whys and the hows of music. It just had a mystery to me as a kid, and I needed to know more. The swamp funk have come together to the charm of Her Majesty. You all know just how good this album is, but I'll say this. Most acts do a medley of greatest hits to sum them up, but the Beatles can drop a medley of unknown tracks on their final recording and make it all feel like a greatest hit set. Who else can do that? The Beatles, Abbey Road 69. Alright, number 68. I love these guys. You've heard me talk about them, rave about them before, so here they are with their debut, Spiritualized with Laser Guided Melodies. This album is a dreamy distillation of everything that Spacemen 3 were working up to just before they split. Basically, this album to me is gospel music of the soul delivered by out-of-body psychedelic experiences, or psychedelia in short. The lullaby tones of the opener, You Know It's True, with the lyrics in there. You know I've been here before. You know I've felt this before. Bring with it this real ache, and somehow you get the feeling that in this album the remedy lies ahead. Are you going to take the green pill, the red pill, or will it be the blue pill that's going to cure your ailments? On here, it's a double album, true double album. Side 3 with Take Your Time and Shine a Light. 2 long songs is the absolute high point of the album for me. These 2 songs are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. There's Take Your Time is a cry of despair, while Shine a Light is a redemption that comes right from the depths of the soul. And as the noise and distortion and crescendo into the latter song, there's just this incredible release, and perfectly summed up by this gorgeous, exquisite saxophone. It just exhales. Beautiful stuff. It's a beautiful album to listen to, just like a lot of those ones in the 70s where every sound feels like it's laboured over. You know, in fact, it amazes me just how much of a good job Jason Spaceman did with this album, considering a pretty small budget he had. Look, I'd call this album more dream pop, I suppose, than space rock or psych or shoegaze, but I'm splitting hairs at this point. It's all of those ingredients, you know, the gospel and that are in here as well already for Spiritualized. And for me, this is just a portent of better things ahead for them. Love this album. 67. Graham Parsons, The Grievous Angel. This one is a real portal into country music for me. And from the opener, Return of the Grievous Angel, actually, in fact, that moment when Emmylou's heaven-sent vocals swoop in and complement Graham's earthbound, fragile vocals, I'm won over. There's this exquisite heartbreak on the album, $1,000 Wedding, the slow burn of Graham and Emmylou on Hearts on Fire. The album is shot through with loss, flecked with nostalgia. You know, Love Hurts, the restraint on that duet is gorgeous. It's just palpable. Amazing stuff. You had a man here calling himself a Grievous Angel, and look, you can sort of see him almost hovering above in the sky. And that feeling of a Grievous Angel comes through. There's pain, there's grief, and also there's hope and release in there. There's a touch of rock to the country, and I feel like there's almost this sort of reverent gospel edge to things at times. You know, there's flaws on here too. There's that hokey live couple of songs, couple of covers that maybe don't earn their place as much, but you know what? The creator was flawed as well, but all the emotions on here are so human. When it comes to country music, I feel like there's 20,000 roads I could go down, but they'll always lead me straight back home to Graham. Grievous Angel, 67. Alright. Number 66, I have a confession to make. I can't find this album. So I'm going to show you who it is, and I'm going to put a picture somewhere and you can hear me talk over it or something like that. I don't. It's supposed to be Cluster and Eno from 1977. So Eno, Moebius and Redelius. This is another collaboration they did, but anyway, I don't know if I've given the album away or lost it. Anyway, this collaboration between the three keyboard boffins could have gone many different ways, but with this album, they left us with this wide-eyed pastoral beauty of an album, and its ephemeral nature is perfectly encapsulated in that album's cover, you know. In fact, when I hear this album, I feel like I am the microphone. I'm taking in sound while staring at wide open sky and expanse. From the moment the opener Ho Ronomino rolls in, you know, you can feel the three of them gently exploring and improvising. Their personalities come out, but they're really listening to each other, giving each other space. They're not forcing anything. It's almost this kind of jazz approach to making music in an electronic sphere. But the results live and breathe like any other German kosmisch music album of the time. It all feels wonderfully ego-free to me. These three great musicians. But to the point, there's no ego. We're on the track 1, a track full of soft percussion, sitar, drones, and guitar. It was actually found to be played exclusively by the engineers Asmus Tietjens and Otto Becker, also of Lilienthal. Songs like Wermut softly decaying washes the keys. Steinsam brings this kind of unease at times as well. There's occasional guitar, bass or drum popping in elsewhere, but it's mostly piano keys, blending synthetic and organic. It's this album, for me, quiet, searching beauty. There's this real subtle ode to experimentation and being in a certain time, space and place to see if the old magic visits. And here it does in spades. Number 65, Foxface Alpha, Saint Etienne. You know, I've called this album my guilty pleasure, but I really need to move on and give it the proper due it's worth here. This album for me is a time and place album. It kind of trips a listener back into this imagined second summer of love in London, you know, the 1980s, turn of the 90s. It's got full of film interludes from the 60s though, and they start to give this album a real flow and feeling. The album moves from dance pop to Balearic and baggy beat influences in there. There's a real wistful 60s revival pop nostalgia going on. Chantussy vocals and these dub and club touches on there. Sarah Cracknell's vocals, in fact, remind me a little bit sometimes of Dusty Springfield. Dusty in Memphis. A little, you know. Just something in there. Anyway, it's really diverse in sound, but all together of a piece for sure. And it starts out with a classic 4/4 version of Neil Young's Only Love Can Break Your Heart. Neil Young for the club. Fantastic stuff. And then sideways into the reggae bass lines in Can't Sleep. You know, the wonderful, dreamy pop of Spring. And then you start to get deeper club tracks, Stone to say the least. Great stuff. Songs like The Swallow, and especially London Belongs to Me. They're so incredibly evocative. The vocals, to me, feel like a warm wind. The instruments, kind of a summer shower. To me, it really starts to blur the line between memory and reality. Do you know what I mean? Did I experience it, or did I just imagine it? I have to say there's this real clunkiness and gentle awkwardness to the album too. And that's part of its charms. I don't know. It could be this sort of brash production in places. It could be reaching for timeless pop glory from their indie bunker. The audaciousness in sort of trying to recreate or refashion a bygone era for a new age. I don't know, all these things start to bring this wonderfully naive quality in to bear, like few other albums I can think of. Just a real treasure of mine that I absolutely love. Saint Etienne, Foxface, Alpha. That's an original press, that one. I wish I could say that of all of these. It's an interesting cover, but I'd certainly prefer the original one. Anyway, Sly and the Family Stone, There's a Riot Going On from 1971 at number 64. This album, like, it's a shambolic mess, really, that shouldn't exist rightfully the way it does. Each listen to me just boggles my mind. It's funk, but it's falling apart. It's so laid back, it's practically horizontal. It's driven by early drum machines, but it's looser than a drunken drummer. There's multi-legged, Woodstock-killing funk, rock and soul beast ensemble. Like, we're talking 7, 8, 9 people in the band here, but they only sporadically show up. Instead, you got an R&B vocal star in Sly yodeling country songs. Then there's guests like Ike Turner, Billy Preston. I mean, I think I even read rumours that Miles Davis turned up on here somewhere. But no one really knows who exactly played what. The music, it's freaking dark in here. Songs like the zombie funk of Closer, Thank You for Talking to Me, Africa, feel like they could play on for days. While songs like Poet, Time, Spaced Cowboy basically feel like they're high before breakfast. The pop sweeteners of Family Affair and Running Away are back to a closer version or variant of Sly that we would have known from Woodstock. They give a bit of a glimpse of sunshine and respite from Sly's mind, but this is where most of this really resides. If the stories of Sly Stone recording this album lying in bed in a coke-addled state are true, then it's one of the most wasted albums of all times. And yet, for all of these dichotomies, for all the uncertainty on here, it's got this kind of sub or unconscious laser focus to it that just gets to the spirit of the times at this molecular level almost. I mean, certainly a chemical level. One of the best late night listens you can find, and I mean, it's just the wee hours encapsulated for me. If I ever need to get loose, weird, and funky, you can bet that the first train stop for me is There's a Riot Going On. Number 64. Now, if we're talking trains, most folks trained for this band stop at their first station, but for me, more rewarding things await. Wire with Chairs Missing, number 63. James Griffith just did a video on Wire, and if you're mostly familiar with Pink Flag, then do a favour and go check it out. I'll see if I can stick a link somewhere in here. Well worth a look. Fantastic stuff. Wire were never truly punk for me. They were post-punk waiting to happen. And with this, their second album, they were out of the box and one of the towering pieces of the nascent post-punk genre already. You can hear them almost gleefully kicking the still warm corpse of punk here on this album, stretching out their songs to nearly double the time of their previous album, while sneaking in some nasty prog touches like synths and even flute in there. Just total punk anathema. It's one of those albums I almost never ever remember the song titles to. They seem to me almost superfluous, you know. You just get lost in the whole mood this album creates. It's a very cerebral experience for me, this album. It plays brilliantly with sound as texture. I love it. It co-opts and subverts pop and punk forms of music, and it's completely unapologetic in doing so. I mean, it's just almost its own contained world. It also foments this air of subtle menace, like very few other bands I can think of. It's an exercise for me in visceral, conceptual art, and it's still, each time I listen, it's a real thrilling ride. I love it. Wire, Chairs Missing, number 63. Number 62, Dinosaur Jr. with You're Living All Over Me. This album to me is basically the oral equivalent of 6 months spent in a shitty tour van. All the crushing lows, the cabin fever, the weird in-jokes, the pummeling energy of just being able to release all that shit you can't put into words for an hour on stage every night. It's this tiny hardcore punk rock band playing out their stadium rock dreams on here, screaming like an idiot, hitting that riff, taking that solo, getting that drum fill in, just pretending so hard that you have the chops that you actually end up having the chops to do it. Jay Mascis' catatonic vocals and that guitar of his, Barlow's vicious distorto fuzz bass, Murph, his drums, all I think of is they're shit beaten. He beats the shit out of them. It's just about everything about how they play that gets me on this album. But underneath all of that is this band who have heard enough 70s FM rock in their time to craft some sneaky, brilliant pop songs like The Open a Little Fury Things and Cracked. Sludge Feast, it's a monster every time. Side 1 on this album, perfect. Side 2, just about as good as this. More than its own little bubble though, I really think others were listening in on this album. Hugely influential on My Bloody Valentine's Isn't Anything, and also on shoegaze that was to come as well, with Mascis warping guitar textures on songs like Tar Pit. They left out the solos though for shoegaze because no one could replicate what Mascis does on here. Look, there's no higher praise for me than to say if I could be in a band and that band could make an album. This is that band and that album. '61. Alright. This channel could be called Brian Enough. Such is my love for the man. I'm sorry, that's a bad joke. But this album is just pivotal for me. It introduced me to the ambient side of the man's work, and it's always stayed with me. I used to fall asleep to this album, but actually now I need to be fully conscious to listen. It's really changed how I view music and even sound. And it's not just me though, this album's influence has reverberated on throughout ambient music and sound space designs, for example, from Japan, New Age classical, or New Age musical movements in the US and throughout the world and so on. There's even been classical versions of this album done. And in fact, Brian Eno saw a version of the album done by Bang on a Can, and he found it incredibly emotionally affecting for an album he made as a theoretical, even clinical attempt to produce what Eric Satie used to call furniture music. I don't know, it still feels otherworldly to me, yet incredibly beautiful. All these synthetic tones and a little bit of piano in there. The emphasis is all on space and texture and sound. There's no way I could have made this list and not included music for airports. Absolutely essential stuff. And that's it, everyone. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for sticking around. Really, really appreciate it. All your comments and kindness, and it all means the world to me. This has been a hell of a challenge, and I'm loving every minute of it. I hope you're finding something in there too. Let me know if you agree. If there's any of these albums that have made it into your top lists. If you've got any of them. If you need any of them. Always love to hear from you. But in the meantime, take care, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.